Go back here. So again, welcome friends, welcome. I'm so happy you've chosen to spend your time with us tonight here at the SFPL Virtual Library. My name's Anissa, I am your librarian host tonight. We also have in the background tech host Lisa for anything happening that should go wrong. We got her, yay. Welcome again. We want to acknowledge and welcome you to the unceded land of the Ohlone tribal people and acknowledge the many Ramaytush Ohlone tribal groups and families as the rightful stewards in the lands on which we reside. SFPL encourages you to learn more about Native culture, land rights, and First Persons. The document link that I put in the chat box has links to all sorts of resources that we use, and we update it often. We also want to acknowledge that SFPL is not a neutral institution, and we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and working towards ending systemic racism in our own organization, as well as we're against the police violence and killings that continue to keep happening. So that document, that link document, has lots of reading information about that and how we go about standing in solidarity at the library is creating reading lists, book clubs. We have a social justice book club, and we promote programs and events and celebrate authors and organizations that are doing the work out there in the streets. So some quick library announcements. Vote, this beautiful student art reminding us to do our thing. Our 16th One City, One Book, Chanel Miller, Know My Name, a very powerful book about Chanel's sexual assault and her experience through the court system. So a heavy read, but so important. Please check it out at your local library with SFPL to go. You can pick up Chanel Miller's book. We are now at 8 locations, as well as 3 mobile spots. So place your hold, pick up your items, and help protect my library family out there working in curbside pickup up and all those other locations, food banks, contact tracers. Wear your mask, protect our workers and the people that serve us out there on the daily. We are almost done celebrating Viva, though we celebrate all the time and all year round. We celebrate Latino heritage and those who are producing amazing work about and around and on Latino heritage. But of course, September and October is Latino Heritage Month. So we extra special celebrate it, and it's coming to an end, and it's been amazing. I've been so amazing folks. Benjamin Boxiera is our On the Same Page author. Please check him out. Friday, we have the poets, Alejandro, Leticia, and Jose will be at our poetry at noon on Friday. Please come support them. Amazing people, got to meet them today for their tech check, and it's gonna be a fun one. So come check it out. Sunday, Calixto Robles will be presenting in Spanish a history, well, not quite a history, but a storytelling of his experience with Day of the Dead and how his family celebrated it. And he'll show us how to make an altar. Again, that one is in Spanish. All right, I'm gonna breeze through these now. More poetry, more amazingness. I'm gonna pause right here. We have the one and only Angela Davis joining us on November 11th, 6 p.m. in conversation with Isaac Julian. This is a partnership with the McCovey Foundation for the Arts and the Museum of African Diaspora. And they're going to be discussing Julian's exhibit at the McCovey, which is about Frederick Douglass, abolition, slavery, and then bringing it into today. So definitely don't miss that one. So excited. And we always want to thank our friends at the San Francisco Public Library for supporting us for what we do. They do have an online book sale for new books as well as used books. So you should definitely check them out. And we miss them as well. We miss that Wednesday step sale. I know, I miss it. So today, we thank you again for being here to join us for author Celia Stahr, who has written a book, Bravely in the Time of COVID, Frida in America, The Creative Awakening of a Great Artist. This is a riveting story of how 3 years spent in the United States transformed Frida Kahlo into the artist we know today. Frida in America is the first in-depth biography of these formative years spent in Gringolandia, the place Frida couldn't always understand, but it's precisely her feelings of being a stranger in a strange land that fueled her creative passions and an even stronger sense of her Mexican identity. With vivid detail, Frida in America recreates the pivotal journey that made Senora Rivera the world-famous Frida Kahlo. And so tonight we have Celia Stahr with us. Celia is a professor at the University of San Francisco, where she specializes in modern American and contemporary art with an emphasis on feminist art and gender studies, as well as African and multicultural art. She has a doctorate of philosophy from the University of Iowa, and she lives in the Bay Area with her dog, who's joining us as well. So everyone give a warm virtual welcome for Miss Celia Stahr.
All right, thank you so much.
You know, Celia, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. I'm sorry. Could someone in the chat box let us know that you can all hear us and see us and all of that good stuff? And we will take Q&A in the Q&A box. All right, and we are live. They can hear us.
Okay, so everything's good to go? All right, so thank you, Anissa, for that introduction and for inviting me to speak tonight. It's really wonderful to be a part of the San Francisco Library's great lineup of speakers. I've been enjoying it myself, and I'm looking forward to the ones in the future. So thank you very much. I'm also really pleased to be able to speak about my book, Frida in America, at a time when the de Young Museum's exhibition, Frida Kahlo Appearances Can Be Deceiving, finally was able to open up. Yay. And I got to see it, and it was so incredible. I mean, it was wonderful to be out and get to do something, and then for that to be my activity, to be able to take in all of Frida's art and the photographs, the clothing, etc., was wonderful. And so I know there was a docent here last week speaking about the exhibit. I'm not really going to be speaking about the exhibit, but I will show some images from the exhibit, because there are several works of art that I discuss in my book that are hanging up at the de Young's exhibit. Porfirio Diaz looks in the mirror and sees his brown mestizo skin. He picks up a powder puff dusted in white and begins to cover his indigenous Mixtec ancestry. For 31 years, this military general led Mexico masquerading as a light-skinned Spanish man because he wanted to make his country over into a Europe of the New World. By 1910, this ideal that had permeated the social fabric of Mexican society began to unravel with the outbreak of revolution. 20 years later, while in San Francisco, the artist Frida Kahlo looks in the mirror and sees her light brown skin. She's thankful she didn't end up with her father's German complexion, commenting, "I remember the color of my father's skin, that I did not like it." She's happy to see her mother's darker skin and powerful, deep-set eyes, accented by her maternal grandmother's conjoined eyebrows. She parts her black hair down the middle and pulls it back into a low bun. She applies lipstick, places Aztec-inspired earrings in her earlobes, and clasps an Aztec jadeite necklace around her neck. Then, over her long peasant-style skirt and blouse, she wraps her shoulders with a rebozo, that ubiquitous shawl symbolizing Mexican women of all classes. But the way she crosses the shawl over her shoulders creates the look of a soldadera, a revolutionary female soldier who wore bullet-filled bandoliers crossed in front. Sometimes, when not in uniform, soldaderas wore their rebosos crossed in front to distinguish themselves as soldiers. They played a crucial role in the revolution, and their fame grew as the popular corrido La Adelita about a soldadera who fought for Francisco Madero's troops came to symbolize the revolutionary spirit. After the revolution, the name Adelita became synonymous with any woman who fought for her rights. Frida identified with Adelita and the soldaderas, and while at a Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, she belted out the song La Adelita, proclaiming to her mother, "I was a hit." Frida knew when she posed for Imogene Cunningham that by arranging her rebozo in a similar fashion to the soldaderas and wearing Aztec-inspired jewelry, that she evoked the persona of the politically engaged Mexican nationalist. For Frida, who was still coming into her own as a 23-year-old woman, that identity was bound up with the image of the strong, independent, and at times cross-dressing soldaderas. Frida would soon start creating self-portraits that foregrounded her strength as well. This is what struck me the first time I saw a self-portrait with Monkey, a fierce warrior with black hair pulled back tightly, showing off a prominent forehead, akin to an Aztec warrior, and a bird-like unibrow above intense brown eyes. A black spider monkey perched on her shoulder places its paw around the warrior's neck in a protective yet menacing pose that has the potential to strangle her as it clutches a red ribbon that loops around her neck and the monkey's. Yet Frida, the warrior, doesn't look fearful. This woman radiates power. She's proud of her brown skin and jet black eyebrows, as well as her facial hair just above and below her lips. Standing in front of a dense field of dark green leaves, her red hair ribbon and yellow shirt position her as a very different kind of woman in nature, a theme I'd seen previously in art, but which looked different. Frida doesn't stand nude in nature with an ethereal look on her face. She doesn't lie nude out in nature, nor does she have a mask-like face, as in Paula Modersohn-Becker's self-portrait with amber necklace. In some ways, she has the strong gaze and connection to nature of Leonardo's Mona Lisa. But Frida makes her connection to nature even stronger with the integration of the leaves, the monkey, and the warrior. Just look into the eyes of the warrior and the monkey. They are one and the same. They command this painting. At the time I encountered this image, I was an undergraduate college student at San Francisco State, sitting in one of my first art history classes, and I had never heard of Frida Kahlo. I had just returned from a 3.5-month trip to East Africa, and before that, a trip to Mexico, and I was questioning what to do with my life. In that darkened art history lecture hall, when Professor Whitney Chadwick clicked the slide projector to advance to this painting of a fierce woman and her spider monkey, all the cliches you can imagine happened at once. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't stop staring. I had to know who made this painting. I couldn't get this image of Frida out of my head, so I wrote my first art history paper on this then little-known Mexican painter. At the time, Hayden Herrera had recently published her groundbreaking biography and was promoting it by making the rounds on college campuses. I was overjoyed when I saw she was coming to San Francisco. The more I learned about Frida, the more I wanted to know. I became immersed in my research for this art history paper and in the world of Frida Kahlo. Just as traveling to East Africa and Mexico had opened me up to new ways of seeing the world, Frida Kahlo's self-portrait with Monkey helped to change my path in life. I decided to study art history in graduate school. Now, as most of you are probably aware, throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, Frida's popularity grew as more and more people discovered the incredible art and life of this Mexican woman who was a trailblazer in so many ways. She was a radical in the 1930s and 40s because she defied gender and racial stereotypes, both in her life and her paintings. More and more books and articles were written, exhibitions were mounted, movies were made, and the merchandise kept coming. By the end of the 1990s, Frida had become famous and I had begun to focus on other artists. I never stopped loving Frida's paintings. I just tucked her away while working on my PhD. But Frida wouldn't let go of me. In 2007, now teaching at the University of San Francisco, I had the opportunity to present a paper for a conference there that featured women artists working between the two world wars. As I pondered which artists I'd like to focus on, I realized that all the artists I'd ever read about from the interwar period were white Europeans. My interest had always been cross-cultural, so I thought Frida would be a fascinating artist because she was Mexican, yet she was in the United States between 1930 and 1933, a period that was instrumental in her development as an artist and the creation of her persona as a provocateur. Certainly scholars had discussed her important breakthrough paintings while in Detroit, such as Henry Ford Hospital and My Birth. But a fuller understanding of her creative process, which led to these breakthroughs, and her complex reactions to what she experienced in San Francisco, Detroit, and New York were missing. We knew a lot about her mature style, but not as much about her development as an artist. How did she get from two women painted in 1929 to the two Fridas painted 10 years later? Or from two women to Portrait of Eva Frederick? Or Portrait of Jean White to Portrait of Luther Burbank, created just 3 months later? Frida's Portrait of Jean White is a well-constructed, lovely painting of this woman who, with her husband, Clifford White, lived in the same building as Frida and her husband, muralist Diego Rivera. They lived at 716 Montgomery Street. Now, with Jean's portrait, Frida combines aspects of a style she'd been working with in Mexico, which was inspired by colonial-style paintings and retablos, small paintings created on tin that were made by local artisans and sold in the markets. They often have inscriptions, as seen on the left, giving thanks, in this case, to Jesus for saving a loved one from death or illness. In Frida's case, the inscription identifies the sitter, the month and year it was painted, the city where it was painted, and the artist's name. When looking at the center painting by Bustos, we can see how Frida has borrowed elements as well, such as the green curtain, the visible back of the wooden chair, and the strong gaze. Elements you can zero in on if you attend the Dion exhibition, as the portrait of Jean White is on view. But Frida had been working with some of these symbols before she came to San Francisco, as we can see in this painting here, Self-Portrait Time Flies, from 1929. This self-portrait was made shortly after she married Diego Rivera. She sets herself up as a woman of the people with her simple white top and Aztec jadeite necklace. The airplane above connects her to the changing modern world just outside her window. When she made the painting of Jean in San Francisco, she borrowed the green curtain with red tieback and the chair from the piece by Bustos. Jean, therefore, is a modern woman who sits in an interior setting coming out of Mexican-style paintings, but with a San Francisco cityscape behind her. This was the type of cross-cultural style Frida was working with in San Francisco. She had attempted some self-portraits, but tells her mother she's not happy with them. One she did like was her self-portrait that she created alongside her husband, Diego, seen here on the right. In this painting, Frida and Diego Rivera, which is owned by SF MoMA, but is now on view at the Dion, Frida conveys some important differences between husband and wife. Diego stands tall, his feet firmly planted on the ground, with his brushes and palette in hand, next to Frida, who tilts her head toward her husband as if to convey her deference to the maestro. Now, most authors see the painting as an example of Frida as the wife to a larger-than-life artist. It's surmised that Frida didn't see herself as an artist at this early stage, but details matter when it comes to Frida's art. In terms of color, Frida's vibrant red rebozo, hugging her shoulders and hanging down in front of her green dress, stands out. It catches the eye, drawing our attention to this Mexican woman, who we learn from the banner above is the artist who created this painting for Albert Bender, one of the most important art patrons in the Bay Area. It was a smart move on Frida's part, as he loaned it to many exhibitions until 1935, when he donated to the newly created San Francisco Museum of Art, today known as SF MoMA. The fact that Frida made this painting for Bender and placed the information in the ribbon above made me think that Frida was more ambitious than most people thought. When I began reading the hundreds of letters that Frida wrote home to family and friends, I discovered that my hunch was correct. Frida was ambitious. She wrote her mother on December 4th, less than 1 month after arriving, quote, "I am painting because they want me to have an exhibition before we go. It's a good opportunity for me to sell some things and help you more. And if I lose this chance, I will kick myself. Don't you agree? We will probably move to a hotel so I can paint all day instead of spending my time sweeping floors and stupid stuff like that," end quote. Although Frida and Diego did not move out of the artist's flat they shared with other artists at the 716 Montgomery Street, a couple of weeks later, Frida told her mother, quote, "I'm painting quite a lot, almost all day long," end quote. By February, she reported, quote, "I've done 6 paintings already and people have liked them quite a bit." Well, Frida's marriage portrait, which is often called marriage portrait, even though officially it's Frida and Diego Rivera, but while her marriage portrait may seem to some to be a statement of her subordinate role within her marriage, if we look at an earlier drawing she made when she first arrived in San Francisco, and we look more closely at the placement of Frida's hand in her painting, the issue of power begins to shift. In the drawing, notice how Frida's hand is submerged under Diego's. In the painting, however, Frida's hand is on top. She has more control. This hand gesture, in conjunction with her choice of colors, the words in the banner above, and the clothing and jewelry are significant. I wanted to know more about Frida's creative development while living in San Francisco. I'd read that she turned heads while walking down the street wearing her beautiful, colorful outfits like the one seen here. But that didn't tell me anything about the impact San Francisco had on her or her art. What I discovered was that Frida's independent spirit was championed by her fellow female artists, Lucille Blanche, who lived downstairs from Frida, and Pele Delap, a young art student at the California School of Fine Arts, known today as the San Francisco Art Institute. They would gather together in Lucille's studio and create drawings, either separately or together. Sometimes they'd pass around a piece of paper and make a composite drawing. Other times they'd choose a theme like maternity, and each would draw their own version, as seen in Pele's drawing, where, as she states, we're looking at a voluptuous woman with flowing red hair and 5 breasts nursing 5 babies of different races. Whatever they drew, it had a witty, wicked touch, according to Pele. For Frida, this meant including blood, saying in English, "Let's draw the bloodiest thing we can think of." I realized that these nights of creative experimentation led to one of Frida's first major breakthroughs in style. The balanced and lovely cross-cultural portraits Frida had been creating in San Francisco, like the one of Jean, suddenly changed in style with Portrait of Luther Burbank, a well-known botanist and horticulturist who became famous for his hybrid fruits, vegetables, flowers, and trees. Luther's life's work clearly inspired Frida to deviate from her style and create the man as a hybrid, part human, part tree. Gone are the obvious symbols of Mexican colonial paintings and retablos, the curtain, wooden chair, scroll. But Mexican and Aztec notions of the interconnectedness of life and death inform this innovative painting. And she's incorporated blood. Frida and Diego visited Burbank's house in Santa Rosa, California. And while Luther had died in 1926, his widow, Elizabeth, still lived in the house. They had the opportunity to see and experience Luther's beloved gardens, including the huge cedar of Lebanon trees seen here and here and here. They also were able to experience standing on top of where Luther was buried, because he was buried underneath the tree. And look where Frida places his skeleton, right, under the ground, with blood still coursing through it, nourishing the roots of the tree, which sustains the man tree above. Luther's life's work and his burial place obviously inspired Frida. But again, the idea to create a hybrid man-tree would have seemed natural to her due to images of Aztec hybrid human-plant deities or Day of the Dead skeletons with trees, flowers, and cacti growing from the bones of the skeleton. Clearly, living in San Francisco and visiting Burbank's home in Santa Rosa had a big impact on Frida as a person and as an artist. She was painting a lot and thinking about having an exhibition. Yet most would say Frida disliked Gringolandia. And this is true, but it's too simplistic. Yes, she disliked aspects of the United States, hated the injustices she witnessed, but she also found San Francisco to be a beautiful city surrounded by water. She marveled at Chinatown. She loved the Metropolitan Museum in New York, got a kick out of American movies and actresses such as Mae West or actors such as Charlie Chaplin. In Detroit, the industrial capital, she found its industries, especially the Ford Motor Company, interesting. I wanted to understand more fully what it was Frida disliked and what it was she liked. What had the most impact, either in a positive or a negative manner? Now, when discussing Frida's time in the United States, understandably, scholars tend to focus on these two breakthrough paintings because they foreground Frida's physical and emotional pain, a subject that's emphasized in the literature on the artist. But she also created two of her most politically charged paintings, such as Self-Portrait on the Borderline between Mexico and the United States, made in Detroit, and My Dress Hangs There, created in New York. Both of these paintings are filled with images that are difficult to decipher in a reproduction. There were many objects I noticed once I'd seen the paintings in person in 2008. For example, in My Dress Hangs There, in reproductions, I certainly understood that there were collaged images in the foreground, right here. And these collaged images were taken from newspaper clippings. And I had read that the context was, the economic depression. People were in breadlines, and there were some protests. But when I saw the painting in person, there were three signs that jumped out at me just left of the bridge here. So they're in this area, which we can also see here, but we can see even better right here. And the first one is this one. It says, "Smash Scottsboro Frame Up." This one is cut off a bit, but we can read Negro White. And then this one over here reads Negro and White, Dressmaker on the Picket Lines. Now this painting, fortunately, hangs in the de Young's exhibition. And so if you go, look closely at these signs. You could easily miss them. And this is typical of Frida's work. There are important details to decipher for those like me who have a detective's spirit, right? I wanted to know why Frida had included these signs. They were taken from newspapers, so she was making a choice as to which photos to cut out and collage into her painting. The reference to a dressmaker on the picket lines takes on significance when you realize that Frida has placed her dress front and center. In fact, many of the protesters walk underneath her dress as if the dress is watching over them. What's also significant is that there's an emphasis on Black and white workers united in their call for better wages, job security, and racial justice. I wondered if Frida had experienced any of the protests in the streets of New York. Did she have direct experience, or was she merely an observer who had only experienced them by reading the newspaper? I began to do some research into this period of the early 1930s, and I learned that the Communist Party of the United States was promoting unity between Black and white workers. Under the party's legal arm, called the International Labor Defense, they hired New York criminal defense attorney Samuel Leibowitz for the appeals of 9 African-American youths referred to as the Scottsboro Boys. These 9 youths, ranging in age from 12 to 19, had been unjustly accused of raping 2 white women on a freight train in Alabama toward the end of March 1931. At their first trial, it was a hung jury, but Judge Hawkins declared a mistrial and sentenced 8 of the 9 to the electric chair. By November of 1932, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the convictions due to the Alabama court's failure to provide the youths with adequate legal counsel. It's at this point that Samuel Leibowitz takes over the cases. In January of 1933, when the first appeals case for Haywood Patterson commenced, his chances of being found innocent were promising due to his new lawyer and one of the women, Ruby Bates, recanting her rape accusation. Yet in April of 1933, once again, an all-white jury found Patterson guilty, sentencing him to death. On April 9th, an outraged public took to the streets in Harlem, and then again on April 25th, and on May Day in New York City's Union Square, and in Washington, D.C. on May 8th, 1933, led by Haywood Patterson's mother, Janie Patterson, seen here. Tensions were so high that the judge presiding over the remaining cases of the Scottsboro Boys were postponed. I soon realized that the high-profile Scottsboro case, combined with the Communist Party's sponsorship of legal services, of marches, of the signing and distributing of petitions to free the African-American youths, was an important part of Frida's experience while in the United States. She not only would have known about the call for racial and class justice through the newspapers and her contact with the Communist Party of the United States, but she and her husband, Diego Rivera, were caught up in the energy of protest. Diego had begun working on his mural for the new RCA building in Rockefeller Plaza on April 2nd. Frida wrote on the back of her painting that she painted it while Diego was painting his Man at the Crossroads mural at Rockefeller Plaza. Both are created during this tense time, and both include paint images of protest and images of Black men. In Diego's mural, on the left lower side, he shows workers carrying signs that read, "Want work, not charity," and "Divided we starve, united we eat." On the right, Diego emphasizes justice for all with a soldier, a white worker, Vladimir Lenin, and a Black male worker holding hands, seen here in this close-up. Diego took the Black man, reviled in American society, and made him a figure of unity in the communist Soviet Union. It would not be long before Diego's inclusion of Lenin, a Russian communist revolutionary and theorist, would be cause for a controversy. On May 4th, Nelson Rockefeller asked Diego to remove Lenin's face from the mural, and Diego refused. Ultimately, Diego was paid in full, but asked to leave on May 9th, and the mural, which was close to completion, was ultimately destroyed. This prompted more protests in New York City, seen here. But before the protests of the destruction of Diego's murals came on May 17th, the Nazi book burnings occurred on May 10th. In 34 towns, university students throughout Germany threw their books by authors such as Brecht, Hemingway, and Helen Keller into fire pits to, quote, "cleanse the German spirit," unquote. The American Jewish Congress had coordinated in advance huge nationwide demonstrations. A crowd estimated at 80 to 100,000 marched through New York City streets for approximately 6 hours. You could say that New York City in 1933 was consumed with protest marches, protesting the huge wealth gap in a capitalist system made more prominent by the economic depression, protesting the inequities of a racist legal system that guaranteed a Black man would be sentenced to death for raping a white woman, protesting the rise of Nazism with its anti-Semitic government policies and intensive propaganda program, protesting the suppression of the freedom of expression. After having a fuller understanding of this history, the newspaper clippings of marches collaged in the foreground of Frida's painting, became much more than a generalized sign of the times. They made me feel anguish, pain, frustration, and fear in this tumultuous period, as well as the elation of unity in the face of grave dangers and dire outcomes. In Frida's painting, Lady Liberty stands in the background, her arm held high, with independent Mae West in the left middle ground and Frida's Tewana dress in the foreground, hovering above the protesters. Perhaps Frida is saying that it's time for women to have real political and economic power. Frida's political painting and Diego's political mural were not isolated works of art that expressed such social and political issues. Frida was surrounded by artists who were galvanized by the Scottsboro legal battle that went on for years, such as Hideo Noda's gouache Scottsboro Boys or Isamu Noguchi's sculpture, Death. Frida had seen the Jim Crow system of segregation firsthand when a year before she painted My Dress Hangs There, she stopped in Little Rock, Arkansas with her friend and fellow artist, Lucienne Block. As the two were walking through the train station, they saw a sign that stated, quote, "for Negroes," indicating the separate area for boarding. According to Block's granddaughter, Lucienne Allen, quote, "Frida insisted my grandmother take this picture of her because they were both angered by such blatant racism," end quote. In Lucienne Block's journal, she wrote of this experience, quote, "It is like being in another world to see such outrageous medievalism." In 2008, this was a photograph I'd never seen before, and I'd never read anything about it. But it became one of several threads I pulled together to better understand Frida's experiences with racism while in the United States and her use of protest imagery in My Dress Hangs There, and also to better understand her depiction of a beautiful African-American woman with an active gaze as seen as in her portrait of Ava Frederick created in San Francisco. Nothing of substance had been written about this portrait. I had my work cut out for me. I also wanted to know more about self-portrait on the borderline between Mexico and the United States, created in 1932 while Frida was in Detroit. It became the focal point of my talk at the University of San Francisco conference. Like My Dress Hangs There, it's a complex painting with a lot of imagery to absorb. A smoke-belching Ford factory, high-rises, and machines occupying the right side, and the ruins of a pyramid, a crumbling wall, a skull, two ceramic figurines, flowers, and cacti occupying the left. In the middle, on a border marker, stands Frida with perfect posture. She wears a colonial-style, floor-length pastel pink dress with fitted bodice. While it's easy to get lost in all the images in this painting, once again, details matter. This proper-looking young woman becomes a provocateur when you notice her tight-fitting bodice and nipples. Her obvious bralessness would have raised eyebrows among the Detroit area's upper crust, but Frida doesn't look ashamed. She stands tall as an independent Mexican woman, symbolized by the lit cigarette in one hand and the paper Mexican flag in the other. She also stands tall as a mestiza, a woman of mixed ethnicities, wearing a colonial-style dress and a beaded necklace bearing the colors of the Mexican flag. It's a hybrid outfit. And it's appropriate, as scholar Gloria Anzaldúa observes, quote, "The Mexican-United States border is a site where many different cultures touch each other, and the permeable, flexible, and ambiguous shifting grounds lend themselves to hybrid images," end quote. Frida plays up her hybridity through her outfit and her connection to both sides of the border. She also plays up her strong gaze, something she'd been perfecting as an adolescent, seen here on the left wearing a man's suit. She continues to perfect her piercing gaze, seen in this self-portrait with necklace created in the United States in 1933 and intensified in her self-portrait from 1940, seen on the far right. But in 2007, I had many unanswered questions about this 1932 painting, both in terms of symbolism and the context in which Frida created it. What was Frida's experience of the US-Mexico border, given the anti-Mexican feeling and the forced deportation of approximately 1.8 million in the 1930s? I had questions about the specifics of the painting. Is the pyramid on the left a reference to the Mexica, better known as the Aztecs? And also, would she have known about Aztec pyramids? Also, why does Frida place the American flag in the smoke of Ford Industry? What did she think of Henry Ford and his River Rouge plant? What was happening with Ford workers around the time she was making this painting? I found out, for example, that on New Year's Day in 1933, Ford cut employees' wages for the second time in 3 years, prompting 9,000 workers to go on strike. A little over a month later, a reproduction of Frida's painting was shown in the February Detroit News article, "Wife of Master Mural Painter Gleefully Dabbles in Works of Art." While journalist Florence Davies belittles Frida's talent as an artist with her choice of words, "gleefully dabbles," she conceded in the article that Frida's painting is by no means a joke. And this becomes apparent when comparing Frida's to other US artists, like Charles Sheeler's American Landscape, which glorifies Ford's River Rouge factory. So in 2007, I still had many unanswered questions about this painting and Frida's time in Detroit, as well as a trip she took by train to Mexico with her American friend and fellow artist, Lucienne Bloch, in September of 1932. Frida had just begun this painting when she received word that her mother was ill. She left for Mexico, and after she returned to Detroit a month and a half later, she completed Self-Portrait on the Borderline. Significantly, at this point, she had just crossed over the border twice. So what types of experiences did she have? Thankfully, I had Lucienne Bloch's insightful journal to provide an answer to this question and many more. In 2008, I continued working on my analysis of Self-Portrait on the Borderline between Mexico and the United States. I was working on it because I was a part of a symposium that accompanied the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's 2008 Frida exhibition. The theme of the symposium, an idea that Whitney Chadwick and I proposed, was to focus on the 3 US cities of San Francisco, Detroit, and New York. Whitney discussed Frida in San Francisco, I discussed Frida in Detroit, and Hayden Herrera discussed Frida in New York. I felt as if I had come full circle from my early days of discovering Frida due to both Whitney Chadwick and Hayden Herrera. It was one of the high points of my career. I was also thrilled to meet and speak with art historian Victor Zamudio Taylor, artist Amalie Mesa Baines, and curator scholar Terry Romero. They had been symposium respondents, and the conversations with all three, both on stage and in private, made me realize that many of the questions I had about Frida's artistic sources and her creative development, both before coming to the United States and while she was still in Mexico, didn't have clear answers, if any at all. I needed to conduct a lot more research. In the weeks after the symposium at SF MoMA, a feeling grew inside of me that I needed to write the book I wanted to read. I envisioned a book for a general audience detailing Frida's personal and creative journey while living in the United States from 1930 to 1933. I wanted to write a story, not a scholarly essay or book, but a story that would be well-researched and factual, yet written in a style that would allow readers to feel as if they were on this journey with Frida. As the documentary filmmaker Ken Burns put it, history is mostly story. For it is the great storytelling tradition found in most cultures and time periods that allows us to understand complex information in a manner that sticks because we feel something. And perhaps the writer Maya Angelou says it best. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. My hope is that this cross-cultural journey will inspire people to think about Frida in new and profound ways, to understand her more fully as a complex, brilliant woman who in her early 20s struggled to find her own voice as an artist and person, but who ultimately broke through to a signature style that she would build upon for the rest of her career. I believe Frida had everything inside of her that she needed to produce a major breakthrough in her art before coming to the United States. However, experiencing both her own personal turmoil and the United States' political and social turmoil created a combustible energy that produced artworks such as Portrait of Luther Burbank, Henry Ford Hospital, My Birth, Self-Portrait on the Borderline, and My Dress Hangs There. As one of Frida's favorite authors, D.H. Lawrence, said, all art partakes of the spirit of place in which it is produced. This place happened to be the United States. And so the word America in the title of my book references Frida's time in the United States of America. But because this is a story about a Mexican artist, it's an America seen through Frida's eyes. She brings a very different and complicated perspective to what we call in this country the American experience. For her, America is both the United States and Latin America. It is the problematic North American border relationship between Mexico and the United States. And it is the promise of Pan-Americanism, which was taken up by artists, intellectuals, and social activists in the 1930s, including Frida's husband, Diego Rivera. Frida is an icon today, but in her role as a beloved icon, as scholar Margaret Lindauer has observed, Kahlo became synonymous with a look rather than with her creative production. That is, Frida's look is more well known than the contents and interpretations of her paintings. To this end, in tracing her creative process, I wanted to look closely at the paintings. I thought it would be incredible if I could somehow discuss the paintings in a way that allowed readers to step into them as if they were rooms. Instead of looking at a work of art from a distance, as one might in a gallery or museum, I thought if I could create a greater intimacy between Frida's paintings and readers, then people might gain a deeper understanding of her creative process and the multiple layers of her often profound works of art. Layers that derive from hybrid images, Catholic, Aztec, colonial paintings, modern paintings, Mexican cultural traditions, subjects from the United States, etc. Likewise, in the epilogue, I wanted to give a sense of how the new breakthrough paintings created in the United States affected her later work. And here we can see how the use of blood and the red strings were first used in her paintings in the United States. But these two symbols, as well as the heart, become more prevalent in her work after she returns to Mexico in 1933. And to this end, I wrote the prologue to emphasize the significance of blood, the heart, and Aztec traditions that were so important for Frida. And I normally end by reading my prologue, but I think we're running out of time. So I'm just going to read the first few sentences of the prologue instead of the entire prologue. And it starts with a quote. The Aztec sun god Huitzilopochtli threw a rebel's heart into Lake Texcoco and proclaimed, when you see an eagle perched on a cactus holding a snake in its mouth, this is where you shall build your city. Aztec myth. Frida was lying in a blood-soaked bed. Small creases in the white cotton sheets had absorbed the red liquid like the fruit of a prickly pear cactus sliced open. Glistening magenta, fruit of the earth, the blood miracle that consecrated the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, now surrounded Frida's naked body with the pain of death. The eagle and snake were missing in the dark early morning hours, but the sun still came up, casting light on Frida's dark, damp hair covered with salty tears. She wailed in agony and despair. Diego, frantic, didn't know what to do. The blood, the screaming, it was all too much for him. He rushed into the living room, muttering something about the doctor. A call was made, but Frida would have to suffer for another hour before an ambulance arrived. At the Henry Ford Hospital, Frida, recumbent on a gurney, was whisked through a long, narrow cement hallway in the basement. her eyes fixed on what she perceived to be multicolored pipes on the ceiling. "Look, Diego, que precioso, how beautiful," she exclaimed. This was the last bit of beauty Frida would encounter for a while. "We descend from death," Carlos Fuentes sings out. "Death smiles, dances, and provides the sweet caresses of a lover. The skeletons of Jose Guadalupe Posada fill the imagination, especially during Day of the Dead celebrations, embracing Mexicans with their origins, holding on to Aztec times. The past is always present," Fuentes whispers. "The heart, center of the human body, is the axis mundi. Keep the universe in motion," the Aztecs proclaimed. "Feed the gods. Blood was the cuisine the gods favored. Blood creates a line from the earthly to the divine, from death to life, from darkness to light." The duality of life for the Aztecs, as for Frida, was a bringing together of opposites. "Everything is all in one," Frida wrote. Seating these opposites side by side to share the blood of death and life, she painstakingly stitched them together with paint, one small stroke at a time. Blood and the concept of duality became central for Frida's art and life while living in the United States. She was a child of the Mexican Revolution, as she liked to say, a passionate defender of the underdog. But it took living in the United States, a place she'd longed to visit since her teenage years, to shake her foundations of home and homeland, forcing her to see a different reality. She struggled and stumbled in this foreign country, cursing it at times, embracing it at others. But always she visualized it with a keen eye for the humor that bubbled under the surface of pain. And I'm going to end there, even though that's not the end of my prologue. But thank you.
Thank you, Celia.
You're welcome.
So we have time for some Q&A. Lisa will be giving us any from YouTube, but I do have one to start us out. And folks, you can put your Q&A in the Q&A box, and I'll pick them up from there. Or if you really want to speak, I can also unmute you and you can say hello to us. I enjoyed your book thoroughly. After finishing the book, there is one thing I found myself being perplexed about. Did Frida have an alter ego? Please explain, yes or no.
Yeah, great question. Did she have an alter ego? Well, I would say yes, she did. I mean, from part of what I wanted to show in the book was that from a young age, she had that imagination. You know, she imagined going into this world and encountering this young child, a female child that really looked a lot like her, but who had these abilities that she didn't at that time, because she'd been through, she'd had polio as a child, and so it affected her leg, one of her legs. And so this child she encountered in this world of make-believe could dance and float. And so I think, you know, what I really was trying to show, I guess, in the book is that I believe that kind of imagination stuck with her. You know, she never grew out of that as an adult. And yes, I think there was a kind of alter ego that was always there for her. She also seemed to always identify with birds. And so I think it could be an alter ego in the form we might think of as a person, but also certainly a bird or animals in general.
And her gender play too is just, I love it.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I would just say about that is you could think of that, I suppose, as an alter ego, but I think ultimately she really viewed herself as androgynous, and androgyny for her and for you know, many others, not only her, was about balance. It was about this balancing of what we would consider male and female aspects of the self. And of course, that duality is also seen in Aztec culture. So, I mean, you know, the interest in androgyny is, you know, in Aztec culture, and it's in other things as well that she encountered. So I think that was really central for her.
Thank you. So as you were talking, I was looking up in our library catalog what stuff we have on Frida and Aztec culture. So folks, definitely check it out. We have some interesting stuff. So please check that out. And then some comments from the audience. This was a terrific presentation. I love the way the author walked us through close reading of the paintings and where her curiosity about them took her. It's especially nice to hear about Frida's political and cultural influences rather than her injuries and self-presentation, which is frequently the emphasis. Brava. So a nice comment. And thank you so much. The presentation was informative, exclamation marks. And if anyone else has any questions, how about anything from YouTube out there? Anybody else want to ask Celia any questions? And you can pick up Celia's book. It's available on the Friends of the Library online bookstore, or support all of your favorite local bookstores, which we are so fortunate to have still quite a few in existence. We love bookstores, support them. And see, let's see, I see 2 more messages. Here we go. Yes, so you will get a follow-up email about this event. This is the #1 question, even though I feel like I say it about 1,000,000 times. This event is recorded on YouTube. You will be able to find it later. And I'll send you all a follow-up email that has the link, but I did put the link in the chat box, and I'm gonna do it one more time. Also, the event that Celia was talking about with the De Young is also available on YouTube. And if you go onto YouTube and look for the playlist for Viva, all of our amazing events are on there. And I gotta say, we've had so many, and our partnership with the Mexican Museum and the De Young, just my mind has been blown for the last 2 months. And so thank you all for being here and joining us for Viva. It's been, I scroll the attendance and I see some of you as repeat folks. So I appreciate you being here, supporting what we do. Let me just look one more time. There's a few chats just scrolled in while I was rambling. Thank you, very interesting. YouTube, did the artist paint art herself? Does the artist paint art herself?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, it's recorded. I meant to ask, here we go. Does the author paint art herself? Wait, that's the same question. She does. Oh, the author. Do you paint art? Got you. We got it. We got it, Linda. You paint?
I have definitely done some painting, but I'm more drawn to collage, actually.
Yeah, I didn't even notice those collage. And we looked at that piece at the De Young. I did not notice those collage pieces in that one.
Yeah.
I love collage too. So,
yeah.
Wow, I can't wait to go to the exhibit.
Yeah, it's great. It's really wonderful to see.
Does she have other pieces that are mixed media like that?
Not a lot. No. That was somewhat unusual for her. But I think it's really because of the time, right? When she's there, and like I tried to describe in the talk, I mean, she's caught up in all of this protest that's going on. And I think that it just really, impacted her. And she had this idea then to, oh, why not take these, images from the newspaper and put them into this painting?
Yeah, that piece is so amazing. So much there. I mean, I noticed so much tonight from just 2 nights ago, right?
Yeah.
Which triggered me to say some of the photos that you had. There was a poster art in the rally. There was the one lynching, stop lynching.
Mm-hmm.
That art is amazing too. The protest art that was around at that time, the hand lettering and all that, gorgeous.
Yeah, definitely.
And where did you do your research at? Where'd you find all these photos and info?
Oh, different places. The protest things, so 2 of them I got off the internet, I found on the internet, but actually the one that was on the far right that said stop lynching was done by Lucien Bloch and Stephen Dimitrov. And so these were artists that Frida met when she was in the United States. And Lucien Bloch's granddaughter, who's also named Lucienne Allen, she is generous spirit. And so she allowed me to read her grandmother's journal and make copies of it. And then also I asked her, oh, can I use that image of the protest poster that her grandmother and grandfather made? And she said, sure.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
That's a lovely story. Yes, beautiful, beautiful, lovely work. Friends, we have made our time. We appreciate you being here as always. We love you. We miss you. And that is a wrap.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And I'll see you Friday at noon. Everybody, come back on noon. Visit us this weekend. We are here. I am here.
Sounds good.